Tonight, the world is holding its breath as Americans elect a new president.
Will it be Republican Donald Trump or Democrat Hillary Clinton?
Wherever you are around the world, good evening from Berlin. I'm Brent Goff.
And I'm Sarah Harmon. Welcome to DW's special election coverage, America Decides.
As the polling places begin to close, we're beginning the counting.
Our political analysts will crunch these numbers state by state.
And we'll go live to the states. Our political correspondents are at the Trump and Clinton parties in New York.
Is the United States getting his first female president? I'm Ines Paul and I'm with the Hillary Clinton's campaign party in New York, where history could happen.
And I'm with the Trump campaign also in New York. Trump has already changed the rules of politics, but will it be enough to make him commander-in-chief?
It's an election that has divided Americans and put the world on edge. I'm Charlotte Potts here at the biggest election party in Berlin. What America do people here want? We'll find out as the night goes on.
We're going to go now to our correspondent, Charlotte Potts. She's at the biggest U.S. election party in Germany right here in Berlin. Charlotte, over to you.
Hi, Sarah. Yes, I'm at the biggest election party here in Berlin, and talking about the numbers, I've done a little polling here myself. Hillary Clinton would be definitely the victor tonight, at least here in Berlin. So with me now, I have a panel gathered. I have here Niels Annen. He's a member of the German parliament, and he's also the foreign policy spokesperson for the Social Democrats. I have with me Frank Sportolari. He's the CEO of UPS Germany. It's the largest logistics company in the world. And I have with me Christina Gonzalez, an American living and working in Germany. So, ladies first, I want to start with you tonight, Christina. We have two candidates that are the most unpopular candidates in history, I think, except for Barry Goldwater, maybe. What kind of choice are Americans facing tonight? Is it the lesser of two evils?
Yeah, I think certainly there are a lot of Americans who are very disappointed by their choices on both sides of the aisle this year. I think from the liberal perspective, many people would have hoped that the Democratic Party would have chosen a more progressive candidate, such as Bernie Sanders, who really energized the base. And then from a conservative perspective, I think a lot of people are certainly disappointed with Trump as their standard bearer because of the language and the rhetoric that he's brought to this campaign. So I think on both sides there's disappointment.
Yeah. So, Mr. Annen, I mean, you've witnessed a lot of campaigns. You ran a lot of campaigns here in Germany. This U.S. campaigns are considered the dirtiest of all times. How is it in comparison to Germany? How did you perceive the U.S. elections?
Well, for me, it was a terrible experience as an observer, obviously from the outside. But you can see also here in this room, there's so many German citizens that take an interest, ordinary citizens that are following the news. And I think in a way, that's also a good message because it shows how interconnected our societies are. But it's also true that there's a big concern. Look, the United States is, with all the criticism that is sometimes voiced here, our most important ally. It's a very important trading partner. And so the polarization of American politics, people know this here in Berlin, has an impact also on our relation on stability in the world. So I think we have sometimes tough fights in German politics as well. But I really hope that we are not going to see that level also of personal attacks and insults. And that's really damaging to political culture. And I'm afraid not only in the United States, but in the West in general.
So you are happy you don't have to run one of those campaigns anytime soon?
Yes, in a way I am, yes.
Mr. Sportolari, we've seen a huge backlash in this election against free trade agreements. Are you concerned at all of whoever makes it into the White House that is going to impact your business?
Well, we should be all concerned beyond the impact on our business. Particularly Germany lives from exporting. Over a third of jobs in Germany are export dependent. And if we enter into a period where global trade slows down or is even reversed, that would have immediate impacts on both the U.S. and Germany, particularly Germany. We need to understand, we need to have more of a vision of where our wealth comes from, where it's going to come from in the future, and make sure whatever candidate wins the U.S. election that there is an understanding of how the economies actually work, and that it's very naive to think you can just rip up trade agreements with no impact on our globalized world.
Trump has been really pushing that campaign against free trade. Mr. Annan, I'd like to talk a little bit about Trump. How much of a reliable partner can he be for Germany, considering everything that he said in this campaign?
Look, I mean, that's the big question. And I'm afraid I'm not able to answer that question. We have not been able to establish contact to his campaign. He has been insulting our chancellor. He has talked about Germany as if we were kind of paradise for Islamic terrorists. And openly, he talked about his admiration for President Putin. So don't get me wrong, we here in Germany believe that we have to have a constructive relationship with Russia, but that it's very, very concerning to us to see a major party candidate not knowing who his country's allies and who his country's opponents are. And I mean, probably if he comes into office, he's maybe going to choose experienced all-Republican foreign policy experts, but it could be the other way around. So we simply don't know, and that's not good news. And I cannot remember any comparable situation. So I'm not in a position to answer your question. The only thing I can say is, if he would be elected president, I think very, very few people would be happy, but of course he would accept that election and he would be welcome to Germany. We would talk to him, but there is uncertainty.
So a lot of concern here in Germany. Mr. Sportolari, what do you think? How would a Trump presidency in specific affect, companies like UPS, for example?
If one takes all the statements that Trump has made and assumes he will literally try and do those things, I think everyone should be highly concerned globally. In reality, government consists of more than just one person. Obviously, there's a president, and then there's an entire staff of people who are going to advise and work with the president on various issues. One would hope, Donald Trump is known for being unpredictable. Maybe if he were to win and is unpredictable in an unexpectedly good sense, it could be okay. But if we do have a point where every trade agreement and NATO and long-standing pieces of the transatlantic alliance are called into question, that's very dangerous for our economy.
Ms. Gonzalez, you are a disappointed Republican, disappointed by Trump, I'm guessing. How do you think a shattered Republican Party can move on from this campaign?
A shattered Republican Party is exactly what it is currently, but it's not something that I think that we can be overcome. I think that it is something that can be put back together, but it's going to take a lot of work. And that has to start, first of all, with acknowledging what Trump has caused to the party in terms of dividing us as a nation, and really putting down a lot of people in our country who, quite frankly, are now the majority in our country. For example, Hispanics, women, minorities in general. It's going to take a lot for the GOP to be able to reach out to these people and to really embrace them in a way that makes them feel as though they're not just a part of the Republican Party, but a part of America as a whole. And I think the GOP can do that with an optimistic attitude going forward. But quite frankly, they need to earn the right to be heard once again. And that's going to take a lot of work, maybe even into generations to come.
On the other hand, we've seen, Clinton running for office. She could make it to the White House tonight, first female president. She's well known to politicians here in Germany from her first period as Secretary of State. How much of a partner can she be? Do you think she'll ask for more responsibility from the European partners, especially within NATO?
Well, look, I mean, Ms. Clinton is well known here. As you mentioned, she established very good contacts with our foreign policy guys, with the minister, with the chancellor. There's a personal relationship. And in contrast to Mr. Trump, we know her advisors. And during the campaign, we talked to them. We had an exchange. So I think we more or less know what to expect from a Clinton presidency. And she was a champion of women's rights, of of social rights. She fought for healthcare reform. This is something we can connect, and I think she has an idea about America's responsibilities in the world, and also America's responsibilities towards its European allies. Does it mean that we will agree on everything? Certainly not. I mean, Ms. Clinton seems to be always on the side within the Obama administration. When she was Secretary of State, she joined more with, I would say, the more hawkish wing of her party. And we were not always happy with every decision she took. She promoted the intervention in Libya, which resulted into, I believe, really a disaster. And her relationship with Russia is not very good. Maybe even in Syria we will have some disagreements, but it's not a disagreement that we cannot overcome. So I expect that times will be more difficult for us, regardless who's going to be in the White House. And Europeans are step by step understanding that with the axis of crisis right here, with Syria, with Iraq, with Libya, that we need to assume more responsibility, not only in military means, but in European foreign policy in general. And I expect Ms. Clinton to be a partner in that. And so let's wait and see. I think it's no secret that most Europeans are hoping that she will be the winner of tonight's election.
Mr. Scorgilari, she's nonetheless going to face a very divided country when she becomes, if she becomes president tonight. Where do you think does that resentment against Hillary Clinton come from?
Well, it's an interesting phenomenon, because when she was serving as Senator and Secretary of State, she actually had very high approval ratings, I think well into the mid-60s. And I think most people that would look without a partisan lens would agree that she was a very effective Secretary of State, is well known and well liked throughout the world. On the other hand, you have undeniably a certain type of Clinton chaos with unexpected things happening continually. That was the hallmark of her husband's presidency. It's been the hallmark of her campaign. And she's also seen as someone who's very, very concerned about earning money. And then there's all the thought about her being too close to Wall Street, too close to the establishment. There's a mood, not just in America, but everywhere in the world, for governments to be more responsive. And I think she has kind of been held up as the representation of old, the old way of doing politics behind closed doors.
Ms. Gonzalez, do you think there were any gender dynamics in play in this election, this resentment against Hillary Clinton? Can we push that back to gender?
I mean, certainly that the gender card has been played throughout her entire career, and certainly into this presidential campaign. And although I'm not a supporter of Hillary Clinton, I would say that I think anybody would be remiss not to mark this occasion, should she win the presidency, as being something that is historic and that should be celebrated on many different levels for many different reasons. But I do think in general that the younger generation, such as myself, the millennial generation, does think of gender a bit differently. And so we sometimes have a harder time understanding some of the difficulties that she's faced as a woman, because for myself and my generation as a woman, I don't think that we've had to face nearly as many challenges as women of Hillary's generation and others. And so for us, it's a bit difficult to understand why this is so hard. But I think that that's something that's a positive going forward into the future for future generations, future candidates, when it comes to the issue of gender and politics.
I mean, one thing that all three of you have mentioned so far is that big frustration that you can feel amongst the electorate in America. America has recovered more quickly than any other, or not any other country, but many countries in Europe from the economic crisis in 2007 and 8. Why do so many people still feel left behind? What's your answer to that?
Well, one has to consider when Obama came into office, the U.S. economy was really in a dreadful state. If we compare today's economy to 8 years ago, obviously there's been major improvements, yet still there are apparently large numbers of people who have just given up on finding work. There's a lot of people who feel left behind, a lot of high-paying manufacturing jobs are no longer available. People have not been given the opportunity to retrain for other jobs, so people that at one time had a very good income are now reduced to a low-income job with very little career perspectives. Interesting in this context, one could quote Bill Clinton, who made the famous statement that someone who plays by the rules and works hard should be able to have a good life by doing so, and that for many people is no longer the case, and that's an issue that has not been addressed in America. And that, by the way, is one of the big reasons Bernie Sanders was able to make such a big impact.
Right. And we also see that trend here in Europe. We have the Alternative for Germany, the right-wing populist party, on the rise. We hear about that frustration here on the street. What kind of similarities do you see there?
Well, I think there are indeed some similarities. It's a paradox in a way. If you look at Germany, if you only see the numbers, I mean, everything that should be up is up. Tax increase is up. Everything that should be down is down. Public debt is down. We are creating jobs. So if you just look at the numbers, you wonder where all the discontent is coming from.
Right.
But in a way, some of the jobs that came back in Germany, but also in the United States, are not as well paid as before. And I think people have the impression that this globalization is somehow, so it's such an anonymous process. There's nobody that can be held responsible. So this is also an anti-globalization movement that comes sometimes, more from an emotional situation, and also the experience that you need to fight harder to pay for a family, make your living. And so we have a populist movement in almost all the Western societies. In Germany, we have it in the rich Nordic countries, we have it in France, and now with the movement that Mr. Trump has been building. Each and every country has its own political culture, its situation, but there is a trend, and so I think we need to take that very, very seriously. Sometimes it depends a little bit on a leader, and that seems to be lacking so far for the far right in Germany, but it can change. So there's nobody that can guarantee that the current economic and political stability in Germany will hold.
I think one subject where you could really tell this all played into that frustration was immigration, highly discussed in this election. You two are both children of immigrants to the United States from Cuba, your parents, yours from Germany and Italy. How did you perceive that discussion? Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric, and what do you make of that?
I think it's absolutely appalling. It goes against the very foundation of what's made America great. America has been a country that has known how to welcome people and to help those people succeed. It's ill-founded. It's also wrong in the sense that thanks to NAFTA, which Trump loves to belittle, actually northern Mexico has been a very effective creator of jobs, well-paying jobs by Mexican standards, and actually more Mexicans go home every year from the United States that immigrate into the country. So he's wrong on every count, and I think it's obviously a populistic, nativistic move that is not worthy of our country.
Christina? I would completely agree with my colleague here, and just add on to that of the fear factor, I think really played into the reason why Donald Trump chose to really push immigration in this way, using this rhetoric. He just pushed a populist button that he knew that he could. And I think that it's below the dignity of any person who is running for office. I think it's certainly below the dignity, quite frankly, of the Republican Party. I think that it's a party that is more than that. It is a compassionate party at its core. And so I think that in order to reestablish itself, it's going to have to really do a lot of soul searching and find that compassionate side once again to undo the damage that Donald Trump has done when it comes to immigration.
Something that is highly discussed here too. I think we're nearly at the end. Briefly, what are your hopes for tonight? Who do you want to see in the White House? Starting with you.
Oh, I would say I want to see, really, regardless of who wins the election, I do have my favorite, but regardless of who wins the election, what America needs is someone who's going to wake up on their first day in office and realize that the only way for them to be viewed as a successful president is to find a way to do true change in America, which means working with our legislative system, creating compromises and creating the legislation that we need to solve all these serious issues we're facing.
Right. Ms. Gonzalez?
I would agree on that front, and I would also just add that I would hope that whoever does win the election, that the opposite side, the people who didn't support said person, that they agree with that, and that is those are the results, and that it's not becomes a challenge and it's forever a process that we then have to debate and go over. I think that it's important that we have these transitions of power and of governance that are very peaceful, and that is something that has marked the United States as being very unique, and I think that we need to maintain that for the integrity of our democracy going forward.
Mr. Annan, you have to be diplomatic, that's your job too, but who do you want to see in the White House?
Well, no, I don't need to be diplomatic. I hope that Hillary Clinton wins, and I hope that we will have an American administration that will be cooperating with us in dealing with the big global problems, climate change, ending the wars in our neighborhood, and the global cooperation on issues that matters. And I'm still optimistic that we can achieve progress in this world.
Good. Optimistic tone from here. I'll give it right back to you, to the studio, and I'll see you later again tonight.
All right. Thank you so much, Charlotte Potts.